Yes.
Fantastic. We're here.
What's going on, man? What's going on with this fashion? You know what? I was gonna wear a feeler top.
Was you?
It's Pringle style. I was trying to
This
find an 80s feeler top. I said to the wife, here's my feeler top.
too right, too right. I
You
love a
know
bit
what
of
she said
feeler,
to me?
man.
I have no idea. She goes, check your son's jaw for it. It might be in there. I went in there, it's in there. So I'm just wearing this. I'm wearing pink, mate. You know, whatever you want to call this. I'm wearing this. So yeah,
Looks
bland.
good.
You know what? What can I say? But Ian,
Still
well,
popping style.
thank you, Mama. Yeah, hoodies as well. You know, cheap
Looking
stuff.
good, looking good.
My little way of getting away with hoodies. But Ian, seriously, absolute pleasure to have you here because you know it's been a long time. I've been bothering you trying to
Mm.
arrange some kind of meeting where we'd be online together talking because you know I'm impressed by your remarkable achievements. You know the things you've done in your life, and we've come from a similar background. We'll obviously go through and talk about some of this of it in part along the journey of this interview.
Mm.
But I've been very impressed by the stuff you've done. And even now, recently, more so when you contact me, tell me you got a radio station. And I'm like, wow, this guy's doing it. This is kind of stuff, this is where I want to be. Radio stations, getting people out there, getting artists out there, helping people with their music, all that kind of stuff. So tell me a little bit about, you know, we're going to go into you later on, but I want to just tell me a bit about this radio station because this to me is one of the pinnacles of the surprise for you. Tell me about your radio station.
The rave session.
Radio station, yeah.
Radio station, yeah. So basically, the rave sessions I could tell you about, but that's for another video.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the radio station basically ORS Global Radio, which stands for Original Rising Star Radio
Mm-hmm.
Station,
Mm.
and they've been together only for since April 2023. But the guys that run the station I've known for many years. So because they've tried to launch this new community radio station, I'm somebody who's all for, you know, giving a helping brother a hand, whether it's in our community, whether it be abroad, whether it be in the workplace, whether it be my brother like yourself, you know, with ClusterView, trying to get some positive things going. So I started off in the radio like back in 2008. I got my first show on pirate radio station. Which was really cool. And obviously that was an illegal radio station at the time. I then got into radio again via the internet in 2012 or 2013. And that was an internet radio show called trustmeradio.com. And that was flying for about 3 years. I had a great radio show there. But of course, mum was diagnosed with cancer and I had to put everything down, you know, put it all on the label. And it took me quite a while to get back into my music. I've always had my music, but you know, every tune reminded me of mum, like, you know, reminiscing about mum. And I just wasn't really ready to get back into DJing. So these guys, just like yourself, they've been contacting me during the year and said, you know, are you ready to jump on board? And I said, look, I'm ready now. So it's only been like week 7. I just completed week 7 last week, but you know, it's going from strength to strength and I'm really enjoying it. And it's nice to be back in the studio driving seat, you know, sharing the music, but also giving a platform to new up and coming artists such as Fidel, such as, you know, DJ Waterhouse, any, you know, young musicians that you might have, and try and get them a bit of airplay. And what was lovely is sending you that database that I got from the radio managers a couple of weeks ago to say that Portugal's listening, Japan's listening, America's listening, France are listening. Do you know what I mean? So it's globally as well. So yeah, really exciting time.
Good. Well, what I noticed is obviously the way it's like kind of your attitude on the station. You've got a great way about you. I call it like quite slick, and but also just you know it's just that silkiness about your voice.
Thank you.
That South London style, but then you're talking you're repping South London, but you're also repping everybody else. So in a way, you know, it's like it's kind of tribal, but then you're finding a way to bring all the tribes together.
That's right.
I love that, you know, but that's you know, I love that way. It's kind of effervescence about you and calmness and sweetness about you in terms of how you just bring people in. And I say that because obviously we look at certain people of color and we think there's always this kind of stereotype that goes with them. But with our generation, there was a lot of that love. You know that, there's a lot of that love. So talking about community, tell a bit more about the community thing, because obviously why are you so interested in helping the community?
Good, really good question. And I think it comes from, I think it's something that's innate and it's part of my core spirit. And I think it started off with home life. I think I was the second out of four children, but I was the eldest boy. So straight away, I had responsibilities back in the 70s and 80s of looking after my brothers, looking after my sisters, even my older sister as well. You know, she got into a couple of troubled relationships in that, and I had to sort of stand up and be the big man for her. As you know,
but you're obviously talking about being a really young kid at that point.
That's right. So, you know, when you think about it, it was almost like young caring because you take on that responsibility because there's no other man in the household. You know what it was like to grow up without the father figure in the house.
Yeah,
You kind of step up the plate, but then you're realizing actually when you get to your 20s and 30s, that actually that probably wasn't my responsibility, but it was a responsibility that I stood up for anyway. So I think going back to it, it's like the sharing, the supporting, the caring, and the support of the family core first. Then when it got to school days and you start stepping out into school, and let's, you know, accelerate to secondary school, I noticed by secondary school, there were certain friends that I had that were maybe a bit nerdy or maybe into music or maybe into computers, but they were just lovely chaps. Black, white, red, brown, it doesn't matter. But when I found that people were kind of bullying them, I would then want to support them as well, you know? And it didn't always have to end up in a fight or a punch up or violence. It was just a case of being able to stand up for those voices that didn't have a voice and didn't have the confidence to have a voice. I think then within school, I was doing a lot in the community. And I think when I was at school, I really wanted to leave school and become maybe an architect. But I found that architecture was a lot to do with maths. It wasn't as so much to do with art. I was not very good at maths. I was not very logistic when it comes to
Not the
maths.
only one. You're not the only one. I'm still
Right.
struggling now. I'm doing
Me
this.
too.
I'm going on to that course. You know, the MEN course, mental health course. And
Yes.
part of that course, you have to do maths, good at maths. I'm having to like learn that stuff again because I want to know more about mental health and I want to learn this stuff. That's why I'm so interested in what you're saying because I kind of see people like yourself as heroes
Thank
because
you.
caring about. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like it's part of who I am. But when I see other people having that ability to look out for everybody else, I'm like, you know what? It's like a kinship. Does that make sense?
Mm, oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think from there, you know, within the school, like supporting others. Then I got into youth working when I left school. Then, you know, after the youth working, I got into study some social work. From social work into working with kids that are they were caught up in the criminal justice system and living in children's homes, challenging behaviour. From there, went into the schools, and I spent
What
15
was
years.
it like for you though, having to work with kids? Because obviously you growing up in a kind of you'd say a single parent household, you know the struggles. You're getting in trouble with the police, things like that. What was it like now passing on your knowledge? What kind of knowledge were you passing on to these kids?
Oh, absolutely. Great question. And I think it was my own personal experiences I was sharing with them, but not making that personal experience my experience. It was like, I know a man called Joe Bloggs, and he was, you know what I mean? So I had to kind of protect myself, but it was giving them stories from the real. And I think when you give them stories from the streets and stories from the real, they really appreciate it because children are the first to be able to pick up if you're sharing knowledge via a book or if you're sharing it from first or second hand
Mm,
experience.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? So
mm.
anybody can pick up a book on social services or whatnot and give you the jargon, but actually have you got examples that will go with that? And things haven't changed that much. I think, you know, the violence has got worse, but we still had violence in the 80s. You know, there was knife crime in the 80s. There was gangs in the 80s. There's just more drugs. It's easy accessible now. And because of that, the way for them to sort of police the drugs within those kind of communities of gangs is by using violence. So it was like things like me staying away from the criminal justice system. Now I got caught up in it a couple of times, but luckily, you know, I never got a criminal record of Mark Anthony.
Mm,
So
mm.
what I'm now sharing with those children, and especially when I stood up in an assembly in front of 300 children, is this. You know, you might make a decision today because that's what you and your friends are doing on the streets, but you don't know how that decision is going to affect you in the long term. So, okay, we all know that if you get a criminal record for such and such like violent or drug offences, you probably won't be able to work in youth working. But what about when you get to 25 or 30 years old? So I say jump forward 15 years now, you've got your own family, your son, who's 8 years old, says, Dad, for this birthday, I'd like to go to Disney World. How about if you've got that criminal record and the USA aren't letting you in? How about your family or your wife decides in 15 years' time that she'd like to take the family to emigrate to Australia? And then you can't get a passport or a visa for Australia because of what you've done when you were 16 or 17. So you can really hear the penny drop because I'm not only giving them choices and understanding of what could happen in the future, but it's also accelerating and looking into the future. And I am the future,
You're
myself and
diverting them
Mark.
away. Yeah, you're diverting them away. You're making them understand this is what they can lose in their lives if they don't follow the clear path.
Absolutely. There
Mm.
you go. So, from there, took it on to the youth working, as I said, sports coaching, housing working, and the rest is history, my friend.
You say housing working. So, in terms of housing working, what are you now doing? Is that what you're doing currently as well?
Yes, yes. So currently, I'm a regional manager for a supported housing firm
Mm.
that's based up in Leeds, but I'm covering the whole of London and the south east of England. So
Mm.
cover from London right the way up to Luton and Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, and all the way down to Margate, Eastbourne and the rest of it. So supported housing, but basically that's for young people and older people as well who may have become homeless. So it could be coming from prison, it could be escaping domestic violence, it could be mental health issues, it could just be rough sleeping on the streets. And my company, we take houses, convert the houses, make them into what they call 6-bed HMOs, house of multiple occupancies. So it could be 6 rooms within a house, but each of them have got their own ensuite shower, ensuite toilet. So it's almost like a studio flat, but the only thing they have to share is the kitchen. Only males in one house, only females in another house.
Okay.
Um, and we have a strict referrals process. So, the referrals will go through the referrals team. They'll send it down to me. I'll discuss with my team whether I think they're going to be suitable for our house. And in all honesty, 90% of them are getting. I don't really turn away anybody, not unless there was really serious drug offences, firearms offences, rape offences. I've got to
Mm.
protect the greater good. But mostly 95% of people will get a chance. And then what I'll then have is a team. I've got a team of 10 support workers who will then give them 3 hours of support a week. So it's called floating support work, which basically is just visiting them at the house, or it could be a phone call, helping them out with benefits, helping them out with charities, helping them back into work, that kind of thing, and just trying to give them a kind of clear path. And once again, like you said, Mark Anthony, we've come from a background where we've seen homelessness ourselves. I personally experienced it myself, although I've never rough slept. But I've stayed in hostels and stuff before. So once again, it's like I know what they kind of need, and I'm trying to divert them off of that path of, spending all your money on weed. You're going to smoke weed. I know you're going to smoke weed, but you need to put a budget in place. You're going to sell drugs. I can't stop you from selling drugs, but you're not doing it under the roof which we're providing for you, because I have got commitments and I've got a duty of care to protect the others, and do have a role to call the police if I've got any suspicions that you're selling drugs. What you're doing in the park is nothing to do with me, really. And then it's called intensive housing management. So you'll look at their budgeting skills, you'll look at how they're keeping their house clean, you're looking at their mental health, you're looking at their socialization and the people that they're keeping company with. You'll look at the sort of police activities and all that kind of stuff, and just trying to give them support. And of course, mental health is a massive thing as well, because, it's not about signposting them to the local mental health centre. I'm expecting my team to take them to the mental health centre. I'm expecting my team to help them fill in the forms.
There's a lot of things going on. It's even more difficult now because there are loads of more issues now that young people are facing. There's a lot more vulnerable young people. And do you know what? What I think you said to me, we talked about various things, but we never talked about it in great detail. So I'm like, whoa. And it's like, again, you're on the ground. You're doing so much on the ground. You're changing lives. You're impacting lives. Every decision you make, every time you say to that person, yes, you can have a room in this house, you're giving that person a chance. That's quite an incredible responsibility and power to have. In fairness, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And what I say
Have
to
you got any sad tales of people that you knew that just don't fit the house, and what happens as a result of that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was one individual that he had come from prison. We wanted to give him a chance. He was originally a refugee, was getting into trouble with the law, very sort of petty but silly crimes. A lot of it was to do with drinking as well and being under the influence. So it was a lot of criminal damage stuff. Anyway, he'd done a sentence. He came out. He needed somewhere to stay. As far as I was concerned, the risk level was quite low apart from the drinking. So all he needed to do is engage in a, not even a detox program, but a drinking program, and a substance misuse program. He engaged with that, but unfortunately, he was still influenced by a lot of the people that he met in prison. So once they had left prison, we allow them to have visitors, but no visitors staying overnight. They allowed his pals to stay overnight. There was lots of drinking going on. It was upsetting the other four neighbours. And eventually, you know, he ended up just getting into fights. The police come round, kicked off his door a couple of times. So smashed up our front door, which we had to pay for, smashed his room door. He got a final warning for that because there's quite a serious breach of his tenancy agreement. And then it continued, even when I spoke to him one-to-one. It continued to the point where, unfortunately, we did have to evict him.
Criminal damage. So you don't tolerate things like that, you know, and social behaviour, things like that.
Antisocial behaviour, absolutely. And what we got to also understand is the properties that we're leasing and taking on and converting, they could be in the middle of a normal residential road. So it's not like a normal big house post. So, you know, it's the upset that is given to the neighbours as well, because that will then end up on social media and give us a bad reputation as well. So eventually we did have to let him go.
Thank you for obviously sharing it with us. We do appreciate it. But look, you've been in music and you're playing music and stuff like that. And some of the music you play is rare grooves. You got like garage, you got house. You play a lot of house, I must say.
Yes.
So why have you chosen this particular style of music? Because obviously people are playing drill, the current stuff now is just like, you know, it's different. The rap is different, the message is different. And with that message that you're playing, you know, is that a message that you think that's going to be able to do something positive for those that listen to it?
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head there. So I think you're absolutely right. For me, soulful house is like the essence of my sort of DJing career. Always loved soulful house. I was into all different types of house music when I was growing up. We were lucky enough to be around, you know, in 1988 when it all began. And what was lovely about a house music and the raves in those times is how many people it brought together from all different genres and all different you know, subsections of the community. So you had punk rockers, you had Rasta men, you had the Cockneys, you had, you know, the black reggae boys, you had you even had skinheads there, but not so much the racist skinheads, you know, the original kind of cool skinheads from the 1960s, you could say.
Scar boys.
Scar boys, the two-step, the rock steady. And then you had, of course, the ravers, the soul boys, as you were talking about, a bit of Feeler and Tashini earlier, you know. Maybe that's where I'm getting my garments from still. But for me, going back to the music, it was about how it brought everybody together, 11,000 people in a rave and one DJ playing that music that's getting everybody moving. So for me, you know, I went away, I picked up a few tunes here, bought a few tunes there. I used to go to Black Market Records, Beggars Banquet Records, could only afford a few on a Friday when I got paid. My mum had an array of 1970s and 80s tunes. My older sister had the soul funk collection, and they were just giving me their tunes. They weren't really playing records at the time. Everybody was playing tapes. So it's like, Mum, can I have this one? Mum, can I borrow that one? Sis, can I have this one? So they're donating records to me. Bought myself first set of DJ 1210s and, you know, just started practicing in the room, and then, you know, started DJing in the clubs and the bars from the late 90s right into the 2000s. But soul and soulful house was always part of what I love. Now, I grew up listening to hip hop. We can talk a little bit more about that and how that was really good for me and helped me to express a lot of the frustrations in my life and a lot of the anger as well, because it is quite a masculine music, hip hop. But I understood it. I understood where these guys were coming from in New York, because we were living the kind of same lives over here. And it was a way of almost like therapy. So I didn't have to act out on the streets. I could kind of almost have this therapy that I wasn't getting from, you know, mass media. Soul music, obviously, you know, that's the heart, that's the essence, going back to the James Brown era, that funk, that Parliament, you know, it was just really beautiful for me. And I was just wanting to learn. I was never a musician myself, but I had a good ear for music. And then, you know, the soul funk as well. It was really disco. It came from the disco era. I love a bit of Michael Jackson. You know what I mean? I love a little bit of Shalimar. So that disco era was kind of when we just started school. You know, it kind of intertwined, the disco and soul funk intertwined with the beginning of hip hop as well. So it was a lot about the dance, and the dance movement back in those days, as you remember, it was about the break dancing, you know. It was much later on in life in the 2000s that I realized that actually break dance came from capoeira, the Brazilian martial arts.
absolutely.
But it was a beautiful thing, and I was a b-boy. I was on the streets. I had my mat in my hand, spinning on my head, my back, my arms, whatever I could spin on, and body popping and having these challenges, which was a beautiful, beautiful thing. But as you can see from every genre of music that I've talked through there was always soul running through it. So when the soulful house kind of came along, and I know some of the biggest guys in the industry in the UK at the moment, but I found out they were sampling some of those disco tunes. They were sampling some of those soul funk tunes. But the vocals that they had across the top, which were live vocals from their new artists, beautiful lyrics, uplifting lyrics. So I like to say that my soulful house is very conscious, it's a very conscious music. It's not all about love and I love you and I'm going to climb each mountain and swim the seas for you, but it's talking about love. It's talking about breakups. It's talking
Yes, I'm
about
saying because it's very much a loving music. I mean, soulful music. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love soul music now, but I would have not been gone anywhere near it back in the day.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing about it. Was so much my mum. It was like my mum was soul. She was soca. She was soul music, and and I just I don't know, because obviously being brought up in, I mean, we might differ there, but for me, being brought up in a single parent family with my mother, as much as I love my mum, and later on I took on so much of her personality, but I wanted to be more like my dad, and who I didn't really know. But I wanted to be more. I wanted to have my dad's kind of that connection with my father. You must understand that masculinity that you
Absolutely.
haven't got. So everything else seems, you reject it. You kind of reject what I did. I was like, oh, that's too girly. I don't want none of that. I just want to hear, I want the boy stuff. So yes, the hip hop. I was like you. I was dragged into that hip hop sound.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. And I think, funny that you mentioned that, because all of my mum's tunes were kind of sitting there for, from the 1960s and 70s, and I never touched it. And it was like every time she's trying to grab me to have a dance in the living room, like, no, please, mum, I don't want to do that. But those tunes were sitting there and they never went anywhere. And I tell you what was funny, Mark Anthony, is that when we got into the hip hop and you started hearing them sampling music in the hip hop, Run DMC and Eric B and Rakim. And then I'll be going through some of my mum's tunes and I'll be like, actually, I've heard that in one of these tunes. I've heard that James Brown
One
of my hip hop
tunes. Oh yeah, that was true. Very true.
So that's what started to draw me into the soul music, because I'm now realizing that my music in the household, which was hip hop, was actually it was just a reincarnation of that soul music, but just with our own vocals on top.
Someone just mixed it up and done something else. Exactly, dropped a little beat on it. It was a great way to express yourself. Definitely.
Yes. So then, off the back of the soulful house, I can slip back into the soul funk. I can slip into the soul. I can slip into the UK garage. I can slip into pretty much any genre of music that I like, including the hip hop as well. But yeah, it's just about sharing. It's about sharing. Music is a kind of higher form of consciousness, as they say. When we're sleeping, you're still conscious. You're just in a different form of consciousness. Even if you've been under the influence of alcohol, you're still conscious. It's just a higher form. And when you put on those headphones or you're listening to music, it just takes you somewhere, doesn't it? It's the soundtrack to our lives, really. So if I can just bring a little bit of happiness for 2 hours a week on my radio show, RS radio show, and it's going out to the globe as well as the community in London and the UK, then it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and obviously exactly. So you're doing that. You've taken what you've gone for yourself, and you've made it into a positive for other people, which is what Absolutely. I love. So basically, I want to say, what was it like for you growing up in terms of, like, when you think about school? I know I went for school. What was school like for you? Because I'm only asked this question because I'm trying to think about the kind of like trying to create a connection with what the kids are going through now. Because people look back and say, okay, this is what the kids today are behaving a certain way. Why were we like that too? Why? What made us similar? What made that struggle similar?
Well, I think when I was growing up, sort of growing up and being in school, I think what I found in the 1980s is that I kind of struggled a little bit in school, to be quite frank. And I think that was because I had certain learning difficulties that weren't recognized at the time. Now, of course, you've got so many different acronyms and so many different names for learning difficulties at the moment: ADHD, ADD, Asperger's, autistic.
Okay.
But I had quite a serious car accident when I was 4 years old and got quite a traumatic head injury. And I kind of felt a little bit different from everybody else. I couldn't quite string my sentences together. I certainly couldn't retain any information and I couldn't remember much. And that's why I really struggled with maths. And I didn't realize at the time that it was part of it. I've sort of later been diagnosed as partly Asperger's because of this on the
Wow.
autistic spectrum. So
Mm.
what I had to do is I had to find a different way of learning. And for me, it was writing everything down. And I
Mm.
found that I was quite good at writing things down after having to write literally everything down that I needed to revise. Or, you know, even if me and you were just talking about what we got up to on the school holiday, like during the summer, I wouldn't be able to remember it. So for me, I think I was struggling with school a bit, but I enjoyed school. On a whole, looking back, I enjoyed school. And I think the reason that I enjoyed school, Mark Anthony, is because it was a coming together of 1,400 children.
Mm.
It was a community. There was going to get, you was going to have some good kids, you're going to have some bad kids, not bad kids, but
Mm.
badly behaved kids. But you know, you had to navigate yourself around it. There were certain lessons that I really enjoyed, such as English. Like I said, you know, I really excelled in English.
Mm.
PE, I absolutely loved PE, and I remember my English teacher, Miss Stanley, and my PE teacher, Mr. Springthorpe. They were just my favourites, and they really believed in me. I loved art as well, you know, because it was another form of expressing myself as well. So
Yeah,
there was
love that.
pockets of
Loved it. Mm.
in there. So there's pockets of schooling and pockets of learning that I really enjoyed, and certain lessons I couldn't wait to take that homework back, and I really wanted to see that appreciation from the teachers when I brought it in. But there was other lessons that I really struggled with. Now, it's not that I didn't like maths, but I just struggled with the logistics, and maths and science are quite logistical. They're like yes or no answers. There's no
Mm.
let's negotiate this. Do you know what I mean? Like 2 and 2 adds 4, no negotiation. So I think the schooling part was a struggle for me. But, you know, I tried my best and I attended school. You know, I liked my lessons and so I certainly love my peers. I really like my peers. And, you know, 30, 40 years later, we're lucky enough to have social media now. We've had the intervention of the internet. I would have lost contact with most of those people. But, you know, we're still in contact now and they're listening to the music on the radio show. And, you know, when I'm having conversations with them, even if it's a happy birthday, or you speak to them once a year for a reunion, you know that there was a good essence in you when you was 14 or 15 because they still love you now. So I think the socialization in school was a really good thing for me. I think also the socialization was a bad thing for me because I was a chatterbox in the class, you know. So every time mum used to come down to school, it's like Ian's been chatting too much, and mum got fed up of coming down to school so much. It's like the boy chats, do you know what I mean? You guys controlling. You got him for 6 hours. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, and she used to tell me what's for when I got home. But going back to the point of me struggling within the lessons, I think that's the similarity that I see with some of the young
Like a
people now.
common thread is that it's a common thread. That's what I'm trying to get to. It's a common thread where kids are basically not fitting in the class, or maybe there's certain things not be able to keep up, and then they just push at the back of the classroom. And
This
then
is
as a
it.
result of that, they kind of find a way out into the street, and then they get lost in the whole kind of
There you go. Well, it's
system.
funny that you say that because the same way that you said they're pushed to the back of the classroom, sometimes they push themselves to the back of the classroom.
Absolutely, of course.
Sometimes they push themselves out of the class. So a lot of that behavior that you see, we call it, like when I was in education, we used to call it behavior for learning. A lot of that behavior when they're getting kicked out of class is just to stop the embarrassment, you know. So they're in class. I mean,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
the certain students that I see within the now, and they could be the biggest and the baddest in the
Mm.
playground, but the moment you put them in the English lesson, and the school teacher knows they're struggling with English, know they're struggling with their reading, but it's like you've got to read out the next paragraph of this book,
It's better.
whatever
It's
it may
easier to
be,
just act out.
and
Mm.
he'll just act out until he gets
Go and
kicked
sit
out.
outside in the corridor.
That's
So,
right.
and I'm gonna so because obviously we're moving on. We're moving on. We've had a great chat, but I want to go on something else as well, though, because this is all important. But you got to meet someone for your efforts. You got to meet someone quite famous, Royal. Do you want to tell us a bit about
Absolutely, yeah. So that was
that?
back in 2012. The school that I was working in, I started working there in 2002. It was a struggling school. It's an inner city school, massive, 1,400 students. They unfortunately they sacked the head teacher about 3 years after I started, and they brought in consultants, and it became an academy. When it became an academy, the consultants that were taking it over, you know, I asked them, "Is my job safe?" And they said, "Ian, what you've been doing for the school over these years is exceptional. We want to keep you. You're going to stay with us." In 2008, we became an academy, and then in 2012, we had the privilege of meeting then Prince Charles, now King Charles.
Yeah.
It was an experience, I must admit, because I've never been a massive royalist. I'm not anti-royal, you know. It's just there as far as I'm concerned. The Queen's always been on the pound note,
Well,
you know what I mean?
exactly. They live in Buckingham Palace. Unless you're
They're
in
in
the army,
Buckingham
you know what I
Palace,
mean? They live in Buckingham Palace.
exactly.
It's like an old place.
You know,
Whatever. It's like,
right.
what's it to us?
So
Mm.
So, but that particular week, I remember, the school asked me to come in nice and early. Obviously, I got my walkie-talkie because I was head of behaviour management, wandering around
Mm.
the school, making sure
Yeah.
everything was safe. Had to meet up Prince Charles, King Charles now, security team. They done their checks with their sniffer dogs. I was on the forefront and just making sure that everybody was well behaved. And then the BBC came in with King Charles. We were standing flanking the corridors, so several members of staff that the head teacher had
Mm.
handpicked could flank the corridors. And actually, when the head teacher and King Charles was walking down the corridor, he bypassed maybe 80% of those teachers, but he actually beeline towards me and said, "Oh, Prince Charles, at the time, I'd like you to meet Ian Lewis. He's the head of behaviour management." And I was blown away.
Mm.
So I didn't know whether to curtsy or bow or what. I wasn't ready for that etiquette. But he put his hand out. He shook my hand. I shook his hand. He asked me a little bit about my role in my job, told him what I do as behaviour management and some of the struggles and the successes that we've had with some of the pupils. And he said to me, "Oh, yes, Ian." He says, "I needed some behaviour management when I was at Eton too." And I said, "Oh, I wish I was there at the time." Really lovely man. Stopped, had a good talk for about 2 minutes before he moved on. And it was a real, real privilege. So, yeah, I can safely say to the next generation that I met the king face to face.
Amazing. You probably, if you saw him again, you could literally shout out, "Hey, it's Ian Lewis. Remember
That's
me?"
right.
I
And
can't
he'll
do
come
that. I
over.
can't do that. Ain't happening. So massive,
He'll be
massive
like,
compliment.
"Yeah, Ian Lewis, nice to see you. Give me a spud." Yeah, really nice, really
Great though.
nice.
So to everyone listening to this, obviously considering where we came from, people that understand, the battle that we went through, and that's it. The struggle. Obviously, people do know. People go through their own experience, and people that know us know what we came through and where we are. So it's a bit of a privilege to have that massive privilege to still be here, going through this stuff. So let's not kind of play it down. Okay, so for all the young people out there who may need a bit of advice, what drives you?
What drives me? Really good question, Mark Anthony. I think first and foremost, every morning that I wake up, I want to be better than the Ian from yesterday. And I know that Ian from yesterday wasn't bad and he was trying his best, but what could I do better today? I think that's the first thing that drives me every day. I think the second thing that drives me is I want to be the best at what I can be. So whether it be ORS Global Radio, whether it be giving this interview with
Hmm,
you,
hmm.
whether it be my full-time day-to-day
Doing a great
job.
job, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. But I think, part of that is because of preparation, before meeting up with you today, I spent an hour just preparing myself for it. Before I get onto the radio, I spend a couple of hours just getting my tunes together during the week. When it comes to work, I start 9 to 5, but I'll always get up 7 o'clock and start. I'll sometimes work through until 10 o'clock. So I think sometimes in life, even though you're getting paid to do a 9 to 5, if you want to excel in your career, it's not just about doing the bare minimal 9 to 5. Sometimes you've got to push that extra mile because it's not so much that I'm in competition with anybody else. Nobody can be Ian Lewis. Nobody can be Mark Anthony. We are we. But what we can be is in competition almost with ourselves to be a better person. So I think that's the next thing that drives me. I think the third thing that drives me, I would say, is my faith in Jesus and Jesus. I'm not a massive Christian. I don't go to church every day, but I know he kind of walks with me because I've been through trials and tribulations in my life. When I've had nobody else to turn to, I can feel that he's there, So I think that's another thing that drives me. And then I'd say the other thing that drives me is the knowledge that, and I remember the great Bob Marley once said this. He said, "My life isn't for me, one." He said, "My life is for other people." If I was just a millionaire and sitting in a castle and doing what would that be about? So I think for me, my drive is knowing that I'm giving back to community. The same community, don't get me wrong, that supported me as well. When I was in hostels, the community was out there supporting me. When I was going through my own mental health issues, there was doctors and therapists that supported me. When I got caught up maybe sometimes in the criminal justice or gang systems, there was people that were guiding me and youth workers. So I think me giving back is a real big drive because I told you about working at the school in 2002. Those 15-year-olds then are now 20 years older. So they're like 35, some of them 36, and they're bumping into me in the street and telling me what an impact that I had on their lives when they were going through a really difficult or troubled time. So, I think they're the things that drive me. And just getting up and just trying to work hard, be a better person.
Brilliant. Absolutely. And obviously, for any kids or anyone seeing this, and I'm sure they will be, because I want to get it out to as many young people as possible, they're going to appreciate hearing that. But did you, when you were, back in the day when we were, I don't know what to describe us as, we were boys that look, stood up for ourselves, whatever it was, the stories. We don't have to go into the stories over here. Did you imagine yourself as you are today? Did you ever imagine that you could be the person you are today?
Really good question. I think, imagine, no. Did I believe that I would be this person? Yes. And the reason that I distinguish that is because at the time it was very hard to imagine where I'd be sort of in 30 years and what I would do, especially as we were growing up on a council estate. There was a lot of rough and tumble. There was a lot of shady characters. A lot of them were our friends,
Probably
but
didn't
the
believe.
shady.
I personally didn't believe I'd live till beyond 18.
Oh, right. And I think at that time there, I think that's what I was believing as well. I think I was believing that because, I felt like I was invincible, but I also felt like if I was going to go tomorrow, then so be it. Do you know what I mean? Which is quite an immature attitude to have, but it was just the attitude that I had,
Survival, yeah, and it's sad to see that. It's sad to see that we went through that, and that's why, for me, it's about these young people understand that they're not alone. They're not the only ones who felt that they were never going to see beyond that day. Do you know what I mean? That
Mm-hmm.
you think this is forever, don't you? You don't think
Mm,
there's going to be a tomorrow. You think this is forever, and I'm not
this
going
is
to get out of this situation. And
this is it.
yeah,
This is it.
looking at us
And
now.
I think it's a really good point and a lovely question. The reason that I really like this question is because I was thinking about this today. I was speaking to somebody at work, and it was like I'm trying to give myself that life today that I promised myself when I was 16, even though I didn't know how I was going to get there. But now there's a lot more of things that I would have wanted. Of course, we would have loved millions in the bank. We would have loved a Lamborghini. Do you know what I mean? But I'm happy with having a happy and free spirit, having good people around me, having a positive mental attitude, and having a successful career over the last 30 years. Now, it took a lot of blood, sweat, hard work, and tears to get to where I am. And there was a lot of times that I did lack the belief and lack the confidence that I could get there. But you got to keep chiseling away. You got to keep believing in yourself, and also looking at role models as well. I'd say to any young person watching this today that's looking at a career and thinking, well, it might be impossible, or looking at their future and thinking it's going to be impossible for me to get there. Focus on a role model or several role models that you like, because even the role models that me and you was growing up listening to, such as hip hop bands or DJ bands or rock bands or whoever
Ghetto
it is,
Boys. That was the role model
the
that I.
Ghetto Boys, you remember that? Yeah, Bushwick Bill, man, and Scarface. Come on now. But Scarface is still here today. He's like a
Mm,
60, 55,
mm.
60-year-old man. Willie D is still around today. They're entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, Bushwick Bill didn't make it. He died some years ago, like many of the hip hop stars that we know. But I think it's about looking at a role model that you can believe in and then trying to get the books and study. And remembering that when we were growing up, we literally had to go to the library to try and find a book or buy the magazines, hip hop magazines, and read up about these stars. When now the young people and children have got it all in their devices in their phones, they can read up about the history of people and just find out a little bit more, because they'll find that those people that are kind of in the limelight now, who they may aspire to, have a lot of similarities that they have today. I'm not promising they're going to be the next 50 Cent, but they may make it as a music producer. Then, like myself, I always wanted to be a full-time DJ, but I'm glad that I got a professional career, so I had that to fall back on. And actually, DJing was great because I could earn a few extra pounds out of it. If I was going to be honest with you, would I want to be a 51-year-old full-time DJ right now? I don't think so. So I'm glad that I built that 30-year career just to back me up anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we come to the end of the interview. The interview ends soon because obviously we've run out of time. It's about a minute to go. So I was going to ask you another question, but I'm not going to do that. Can you just give a big shout out to your friends, anybody that you want to pay respect to or homage to?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to give a big shout out to Mark Anthony and ClusterView. It's an amazing thing what you guys are doing. And just like myself, when we're talking about trying to build something for the community, my ORS radio station, massive, like we're going places. We've got a big dance coming up like later on in the year. It's about like us building together and coming together. No man's an island. So I want to give a big shout out to Reggie McGregor and the whole McGregor family. Big shout out to your family as well, sir. Big love to my brothers, my sister, my nieces, got to hold tight everybody at work and everybody that's working alongside mental health in the caring community, whether it be in schools, whether it be in housing, whether it be in mental health hospitals or the NHS. Big up to everybody that's giving back to this community, because I think London
We're gonna
City
run out of time
and
though,
the
bro. We're gonna
UK.
run out of time. Sorry.
All right,
Sorry,
London
man.
City is
Ian
wonderful.
Lewis, everyone. It's Ian Lewis. I talk with Ian Lewis on ClusterView. Thank you so much.